Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Jimmy Noonan, former Director of Security for World Wrestling Entertainment, kind of known for the movie Super Troopers, not Super Troopers 2, which is in your theaters right now, but Super Troopers, the original, Frank Galifianakis, the Bunty soap driver. But I've had an interesting acting career. I had an interesting life at WWE, and those are some of the things we're going to be talking about on my show, which you are listening to right now, called Noonan Speaks. Some of you might be shocked to hear my voice right now. I officially retired from the radio business. I guess it was about a year and a half ago. I was talking to a kid named Evan Prout in Baltimore. Really nice kid. And we had this great interview. And at the end, I told him, I said, you know what? I've told all the stories. I give the same answer every time about Vince, about Stephanie, about Triple H, about my time backstage, about my duties backstage, about all the little stories in different countries. And I was just done. And the story had been told. It was over. I was hitting a time in my life where I'm in my late 50s. I recently turned 60. And I was just over the wrestling business. I was over a lot of things. You know, you get to a certain age in life and you look at things a different way. And so I retired that afternoon. And I even got a little emotional. And I said, this will be my last interview I give. And I thanked the wrestling world, and I thanked everybody. And I basically said goodbye. But here I am. And why am I here? That's the question right now. Why am I here? I'm going to tell you why I'm here. I'm here because I met a guy a few years ago named Larry Francis, and we started talking over time. And Larry slowly proposed doing a show together, a podcast. And he kind of liked the name, when we talked about names, he kind of liked the name Noonan Speaks. And I was like, you know, we did Noonan Speaks before. I've never been crazy about it, like, ooh, Noonan Speaks, like Noonan's so important. And Noonan's got so many things to say. But, you know, in a lot of ways it makes sense. All the cool names were gone anyway. You know, kayfabe commentaries, all these kind of cool wrestling slang words were gone. So here we are. We're Noonan Speaks. Larry Francis is here with me, and this is our very first show. I am coming to you from New York, a city so nice they named it twice. And we're going to work. We're going to work tonight. We're going to work. It's going to be me and Larry. The only thing is we're going to do a little bass backwards tonight. Larry's going to interview me as a way to introduce me to people who don't know who I am. Wrestling has changed. I came up in the very late '99, and I was there to the middle of 2007, and I watched so many things happen. I watched Brock come up. I watched Randy Orton come up. I watched this guy named Batista come up, John Cena, Shelton Benjamin, Rob Waterman, for those who remember him, Rico Constantino, and the rest of them. The class of 2001, 2002, if you will, who have all these years later, I mean, you got to say somehow transcended. Many of them have transcended wrestling. I mean, Brock will go down as one of the greatest ever. Cena will go down as one of the greatest ever. Batista ended up a 6-time champion, and at this moment will have the second highest weekend grossing opening weekend of a movie in history. things have really changed dramatically, and it's many years have gone by, and a lot of people, as many people who know who I am, there are so many of you who don't know who I am. And I'm here tonight to introduce myself to you and to say hello and to say I think I'm one of the good guys. I'm not here to crap on anybody. I'm not here to crap on the business. I'm here to have fun. I'm another voice in the wrestling business. I have a different perspective because I'm one of the only guys who talks about what I do, which was wrestling. I'm not a wrestler. You know, maybe I took one or two bumps in all those years. My first bump, by the way, was from Vince McMahon at WrestleMania at Safeco Field in Seattle. What WrestleMania was that, Larry?
That was WrestleMania 19.
WrestleMania 19, I took my first bump from Vince McMahon. And here we are all these years later. And again, I just want to have some fun. I'm a different voice. I like to think I'm a fun voice. And me and Larry are going to give you everything we can. So, with that said, thank you for listening. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're taking your time to listen to me and not Chris Jericho. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I am. I'm serious. The hell with Jericho. No, Chris is a friend. But I'm just glad you're spending your time with me right now. And I'm going to turn it over to Larry Francis, who's going to ask me a few questions. Welcome to Noonan Speaks.
Hey, Jimmy, how you doing tonight?
Larry, what's up?
Not much. You know, I think it's really cool after talking it over that you came back to the world of podcasting, because when you first did it many years ago on Monday Night Mayhem and with Bruce Pritchard when he did the original version of Something to Wrestle, you guys were way ahead of your time. You were podcasting before Steve Austin made it a thing.
Yeah, and it's funny, I had no idea at the time what a big deal Monday Night Mayhem. Actually, there was probably about 6 or 7 top shows. 2 were British, one was, and then there were a few Americanized radio shows. And they weren't radio per se, they were almost like cable radio shows. I don't even know what the hell to call them. But orders here, I mean, my competition, if I make it in this business, which I fully intend to with you, if I make it, I'm going to be up against who? I'm going to be up against Jericho. I'm going to be up against Stone Cold. I'm going to be up against Jim Ross. Never mind. Who else? Tell me. Ryback. Ryback's got his own show. Colt Cabana's got a show. Tell me the other guys who got shows right now.
When you started with Bruce Pritchard, on that format, you guys would just go over different stories of the week, what was happening in the wrestling world, and then you did that for a little bit. He did his own thing with TNA and all that stuff, and then when he decided to bring back his show, he got with Conrad Thompson, and they turned that into a historical podcast where they go over former talents in the business, the wrestling legends, and pay-per-views, and next thing you know, it's now the #1 podcast in the wrestling business. So it's pretty crazy that you started on that show from the get-go, and here's Bruce just getting all the downloads.
Yeah, well, you know, and there's something interesting about the whole Bruce thing. Bruce, so I think what happened, 2 things happened simultaneously, if I'm not mistaken. One is that Bruce got hired again by, I think, TNA. I don't think he went back to WWE at the time. I think he got hired by TNA. And at the same time, I am the one who broke the news about Joni Laurer doing porn. And me and Bruce didn't talk about it before the show. And Bruce was like really, really, really surprised. And after we made the announcement, Joni Laurer, Chyna, went on TMZ and she said terrible things about us. And anybody who, you know, well, I'm the one who brought it up, so it was me. I mean, she really went to town on us. But I had it from a reliable source in Hollywood, actually an actor who had sex with her in the porn video, that she was in fact doing porn. And Bruce called me like 3 times and he said, "Are you absolutely sure?" I said, "Come on, Bruce. I would never say, you know, I would never bury a woman like that just for fun. I would tell the truth. I wouldn't listen. My animosity for Joni Laura has been well documented. Me and Joni just never got along. You know, I wasn't with her much, but every time I was, I mean, it was not fun. She was not fun to be around. But I never wished her badly. That's just who she was. She wasn't the only one who was kind of ugly to security. There were a few of them. But Joni was particularly ugly. It is what it is. But Bruce was kind of bent out of shape because he didn't trust the source, which was me. And look what happens, you know. And then at the end of that, when 6 months later, when it came out that she had done the video, you know, I sent letters out to Diva Dirt and a few different websites, and I demanded an apology from them. Never got it. But I said, you know, you guys buried me after I told the story, and you tried to hurt me because I hurt your girl, Joni Laura. But at least I was telling the truth. So, yeah, I was happy to work with Bruce. It wasn't very long. I don't even know how many shows we did, but I thought we worked well on the radio. I like Bruce, by the way. I like Bruce and his brother Tom, two real solid, good guys. I never had a problem with Bruce. I saw him every day for the better part of 8-9 years, and I never had a problem with Bruce. And I enjoyed working with him on the radio.
Really good to hear, because you'll see those headlines on the Dirt Sheet websites. Oh, Bruce Pritchard and Jimmy Noonan got major heat because of the Chyna story. So just for clarification, we get to get that out of the way, that there was no problem. You had a slight disagreement about the story at the time, and everything's cool.
I know it was that we caught a lot of heat, and I don't even remember if it caused heat between me and Bruce, but I think it didn't help between us. I think it helped him close shop quicker. You know what I mean? The fact that he was going to one of the feds, the Joni thing was in the works. So I think it was just easier for him to close down the podcast, which he closed down for, if I'm not mistaken, many years.
Coincidentally, around the same time, that's when they were bringing Joni into TNA, so maybe he felt like, we can't get this out. This can't be mainstream because it might ruin the business deal to come to TNA.
Yeah, but you know what? The odd thing is, I just looked at it as a piece of news. I didn't know it was going to blow up like that. And it was a piece of news. It is a giant, literally and figuratively, in the porn business. And Lee calls me one day and he goes, it doesn't call me, sends me a text. He says, hey, I just spent the afternoon with your girl, Joni. I said, Joni who? He said, Chyna. I said, oh, really? I said, you guys have lunch? He goes, no, I just seen. I go, Joni Laura's doing porn? He said, yeah. I go, dude, that's hysterical. I mean, I never even thought of it, you know. And then I put, you know, and then I just said it on the radio. I didn't try to hurt Joni. Why would I do that? You know, I grew up with 7 women, bro. Sound familiar? Bro. Listen, bro. I grew up with 7 women, and I have a 13-year-old daughter, and I only tell the truth. You know, so I was just reporting a story. I didn't know it was going to become this giant thing, and the Diva Dirt fans were going to go crazy. You know, oh my God, one of our divas did porn. This guy's so bad. So yeah, it made a lot of news, and it's still on the internet. You know, former WWE Security said that Chyna does porn. How dare him? It was true.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Like, it was such a big deal at the time. You can't help but think right off the bat, like, oh, this might be fake news, but you see something big like that, and lo and behold, it becomes true. You know, that's what happened. People are like, oh, Jimmy wasn't full of crap after all.
Yeah, and at the same time, I was writing for, there was a kid from WWE years ago named Lenny, and he had this blog called KingLenny.com. I wrote a story called Not So Fine Chyna, and it was about her, you know, it actually told this story. And if I'm not mistaken, I either verbalized it or said it in that article that, how do I say this? A double penetration scene means no Hall of Fame for you. Like, straight sex is one thing. A gangbang is probably going to keep you out of the Hall of Fame. Now, that may change someday, but at the time, you know, I mean, that's pretty much what's keeping her out of the Hall of Fame? Her porn career. How do you do that? You know, it's not quite Benoit going home and slaying his family, but it's pretty bad.
I heard that excuse, and I just thought that was a bunch of nonsense, because you have and you've had divas on that roster who've done adult content. You even had one inducted into the Hall of Fame, so you can't say, well, we're not going to induct Chyna because of those movies, but it's okay for this other person. So it's like you have to be consistent or you're giving off double standards, and that's not right.
Well, it was the nature of this sex. Remember, they were parodying the wrestling business. Okay, so that's strike one. Strike two, there were 5, 6, 7 guys and 1 woman. You know, maybe a diva doing a straight sex scene or doing a sex tape is one thing, because that's a part of life. Gangbangs and double penetrations are not necessarily a natural part of most people's lives. You see what I'm getting at? And there are some people who are so offended by such a thing, just the idea of it, that, you know, it won't take an act of God to get her into the Hall of Fame, because at the end of the day, WWE will do what's best for business and what's best for the bottom line, I think. And maybe they will decide one day that it's best to just forget about what she did and look at her wrestling career. I mean, I don't think it's even arguable anymore. She did more for women's wrestling than anybody. I mean, she changed the nature of women's wrestling. She was so big. She was so physical. She was like one of the guys that will never, ever... Could you see a cage match right now between Sasha and Chyna?
Oh, yeah. Chyna would just destroy her, and everybody knows that.
Chyna would tear her arm off and have it as an appetizer before the match. And by the way, this is coming from a guy who was decidedly not a fan of Chyna's. And we can leave it at that.
When you hear stories of Chyna, of course, it's different for each person that worked with her, but at least in my experience, when I talked to people from the industry about Chyna, like, it was mostly good things. So when you told me that and you're not the only one, but whenever I hear a bad experience about her, it just caught me off guard, because that's not something I would expect. So in your opinion, what do you think that is? Do you think she just had something against you, or you weren't one of the boys? What's your take on that?
Oh, God. It was at the end of her stay at WWE. She was miserable. I just think she was going through a rough time in her life, and I don't think she liked many men at the time. She was in a position of superiority to me because I was one of the security guys at the time, and she was Joni Laurer, the 8th wonder of the world. So I think she took maybe slight advantage of that situation to say and do some things that weren't really kind. She didn't have to say in her book that she said WWE Security. I won't even say it. Just picture bad school crossing guards. Airports, I'm protecting you. At venues, I'm keeping your area safe and risk-free and threat-free. I'm making you feel comfortable when you're in the ring. And then you go and say bad things about me and my partners at the time, because there were a couple of us, affectionately known as the Jimmies. By the way, a piece of trivia, speaking of the Jimmies, who would you think is the only guy in the history of WWF, and WWE who has been in a Broadway show that won 5 Tonys and has been thanked in a Hall of Fame speech? Who would that be?
I don't know.
Yeah, that would be me. I'm that guy. I'm the only one in the world who exists that ever happened to. So there, that's my claim to fame.
Just for the record, for our listeners who may not know, who was the person who thanked you in their speech?
Trish Stratus thanked the Jimmies. I think there was another one though too. Was it Angle?
Probably.
Maybe somebody like that. But I think I've been thinking like two speeches. One was general and one was specific, but I couldn't tell you which one. But Trish Stratus went out of her way to thank the Jimmys, and of course there were only two of us when by the time Trish was there. Not by the time, when Trish was there at the end, there was Jimmy Noonan, me, and Jimmy Tillis, Stone Cold Jimmy, and Black Jimmy. And by the way, I'm Stone Cold Jimmy, just in case you thought I may be Black Jimmy.
A lot of wrestling fans from that time, during the Attitude Era, they would remember you being the head of security, and you would get that comparison quite a lot. Like, oh, hey, that guy looks like Stone Cold. So in a way, it was kind of a blessing because you had that look to you.
Well, for a while, I actually was. I mean, me and Steve matched each other in size and in look. I mean, he was Stone Cold and I was, the guy in the corner. But we matched each other so much that JR, who was the head of talent relations at the time, demanded that when I was at ringside, I wear a hat. So for my first 3 years at WWE, I wore a hat. I had to wear like the pay-per-view du jour hat. If there was a SummerSlam coming up for the whole month, I wore a SummerSlam hat on Raw and SmackDown. If it was, oh God, I can't even remember the names of the pay-per-views in those days. What was Backlash? If it was a Backlash after, WrestleMania, I wore the Backlash hat. But JR always wanted me to wear a hat because he thought I looked too much like Stone Cold.
It was really interesting that you had quite a close resemblance to Steve. So did they ever ask you to like be a stunt double or something in case he did one of those crazy backstage segments?
No, nothing like that. Well, first of all, he would never have a stunt double because, that just doesn't happen in WWE, I mean, do they have a stunt double for Shane when he's going 50 feet off the, so not a stunt double, but the only time it ever happened where I think anything close happened is one night we were at WWF New York and we were doing Velocity. And there was a director there, I can't remember his name, a little guy, a friendly guy. And he was directing the show, and they called for security, and I came up behind him, and he turned around, and he said, "Holy shit, this is the guy. Oh my God, he really does look exactly like Steve." And that was the close that it was that anybody ever brought over. Nobody would ever put it over, at WWE that I actually looked like Steve. But I was affectionately known by everybody as Stone Cold Jimmy. There were different Jimmys. There was Tan Jimmy. There was Ponytail Jimmy. There was Crackhead Kerry Jimmy. There was Jimmy, Black Jimmy, and there might have been one other Jimmy for a while. And interestingly enough, we were all named Jimmys. And that's when WWE was going through a few different changes. The business was changing. The nature of protecting the intellectual property was changing. There were threats against Stephanie one time. The world was in a very litigious state. Everybody was suing everybody, and WWE just decided they needed more security. So they ostensibly hired a bunch of guys and for over a short period of time, and then chose the ones they wanted there full time. And I ended up being the guy along with Jimmy Tillis.
So you started out as an actor. How'd you transfer from that into a job working for the WWE?
Well, when you're an actor and you're not Jack Nicholson, you're not Tom Hanks, you're not Tom Cruise, you have to have another job. So I always had other jobs, and I always did very, very well at them. I had a personal training business. I was in the security business. But in my heart of hearts, I always wanted to be an actor. I started in the acting business in high school. I was always a star of the play in high school and in a couple of college things. I did a little dinner theater for a while. And then I went out to California, Memorial Day of 1987, to get my SAG card. I got my SAG card on a big Harvey Weinstein movie. Interestingly enough, Harvey Weinstein's been in the news lately. Poor Harvey. Well, not poor Harvey. He's a bad guy. One of Miramax's first major dramas was a movie called The Grifters with John Cusack and Annette Bening and Angelica Houston, one of my favorite actresses. I got my SAG card. I got my Screen Actors Guild card in the opening scene of The Grifters. But I always kept the other stuff. I always kept personal training, and I made some money doing that and doing security. I worked for a few days, one time with Charlton Heston. You know, when you start like that, you move up in the ranks pretty quickly. You know, I was a guy of a certain size and a certain look and spoke relatively well, and people just naturally trusted me. So I gravitated into bigger and better jobs in the acting business, bigger and better jobs in the personal training business, and bigger and better jobs in the security business. And lo and behold, I started working at WWF New York, and I was discovered, so to speak, you know. And after going out on the road for a few weeks, they chose me to be the guy. They liked me, they trusted me, and again, with me and Jimmy Tillis. And by the way, if nobody's ever heard me say this before, Jimmy Tillis was my partner. Jimmy was even my boss for a little while, and he was on Raw and I was on SmackDown, and we'd go back and forth because we needed a guy for each show. I learned a lot from Jimmy Tillis. Jimmy Tillis will always be a friend and a mentor. So Jimmy, if you're listening, hey buddy, God bless you. God bless your boys. God bless your family, and I hope to see you soon.
You were with WWE for so many years, working as the Director of Security. For many wrestling fans, like, that's such an interesting position to be in, and that's why I was so adamant about you starting a podcast, because it's not any other podcast you listen to these days. It's either people who've never in the business who just watch your show and give their opinions, or it's current wrestlers, it's former wrestlers, but you never really hear it from people, unless you're a writer, that were actually there, you know. So somebody like you could give a different perspective, you know, behind the scenes guys. You know, it's not something you hear too often.
Yeah, and there's obviously, you know, there has to be a certain amount of discretion involved. There's discretion as it pertains to the business in general. There has to be discretion as it pertains to personalities and people, and there has to be discretion as far as the business aspect. And there will be discretion. There will always be discretion. I'm interested in talking about my stories, and I'm interested in hearing about somebody else's journey. I want to hear Dallas Page's journey, but I want to hear it. You know, it's been done so many times. It's been Dallas. Let's say we have Dallas Page on someday. Okay, it's been done in all the other shows, in a different way of speaking, in a different way of communicating, and a different way of telling his story. And I'm going to ask different questions because I come from a different angle. Listen, my sister won a Pulitzer Prize 1 year ago. Her name is Peggy Noonan. And Peggy Noonan got famous writing Ronald Reagan and George Bush's speeches, 1,000 Points of Light, A Kinder, Gentler Nation, Read My Lips. My sister put those words in the president's mouth. And her book publisher came to her one day and said, listen, she had already had many, many best-selling books. And her book publisher came to her one day and said, Peggy, we want you to do a book about John Paul. And Peggy very politely, in her very Peggy way, said, it's already been done. Like, I'm not interested, only because it's already been done. And you know what their answer to her was? Their answer to her was, you're right, but it's never been done by you. You get the difference, Larry? I have a different way of looking at things. You know, I have Christopher Nowinski. I had a nice big fat cup of coffee at WWE. he had a nice little run there, you know, at a time when there was so much talent at WWE. They stuck him with the tough gimmick because he was a smart guy. He was a Harvard guy. But Christopher Nowinski is doing great things in other facets of the world. Great things. And Christopher Nowinski, I called him one day to ask him to do a testimonial for my website, talking about, somebody to say something nice about my services, the services I provided. And Christopher Nowinski said Jimmy deftly navigated some very complicated waters backstage. And because of that, because of the way I handled myself, and because of the nature of my job, and because of the sensitivity of my job, and because of the complexity of my job and the many hats I wore, I have a different way of looking at things. So of course my interview with Dave Bautista or Bobby Lashley or Crystal Marshall or anybody else is going to have a different tone to it. And I hope it has the type of tone that's going to be interesting to people and is going to make them want to listen more, But this is going to be the tenor right here, This is it. But I want to have fun. I want to laugh, man. Like I want to have people on that I know, and I want to have people that I relate to and tell stories about how crazy the business is and how crazy it is being on the road. And do you remember that hotel in Helsinki, Finland, man? Or my God, how about that arena in Wichita, Kansas? Or how about doing a house show in Monroe, Louisiana? Oh my God, you know what I mean? Those are the things I want to talk about, and that's what I think is important.
That's why I'm so excited that we were able to bring back your show, because when we talk to these people, the guys that you worked with, your coworkers, you've been around the world, you've seen a lot of things, you have that personal connection, so it's going to make this podcast stand out. We're going to have a unique take on it.
Lordy, I hope so. I mean, if not, why even try it? Why even do it? Why would I be here? I got a lot of stuff going on, man. I'm working right now. Right at this minute, I'm working. My client is upstairs. Sleeping right now. He's on the 45th floor of his own building, sleeping. And I'm down on the 44th floor because I have the whole floor of the building on the 44th floor. And I'm doing a podcast, our introductory podcast. So I'm working right now. I'm with a client full time. I live in his house. I'm a live-in security guy in his house. I am the director of security for all his holdings all over the world, from New York City to Phuket, Thailand. You know what I mean? I run his security, and we just got back from 3 weeks in Miami, and in 10 days we'll be in the south of France on the yacht. And I'm going to do a show from the south of France, on the yacht in the south of France. So I don't know if anybody's done a podcast before from the 5th, 6th biggest yacht in the world in the middle of the Mediterranean, maybe while Uma Thurman and Leo DiCaprio are upstairs. I don't know. And I'll be in the basement or in my galley doing a podcast for you people. But who else has probably done a podcast from the middle of the Mediterranean, right? Right off Côte d'Azur, somewhere around Nice, France, between the Hotel du Cap and the Cannes Film Festival. Sounds pretty cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And for our listeners out there, we'll do a podcast sometime focusing on Hollywood, because Jimmy has stories about there too, being a bodyguard, protecting the rich and famous. I think that would also be interesting. So that was something we'll be looking at down the road, but for the most part, we're going to be focusing on World Wrestling Entertainment. Being in that position, Jimmy, once you got hired and being the main guy, what would you say were your day-to-day responsibilities while you were working there?
The people in the building always knew where you were. You were either in catering, getting coffee, or you were out by the ring. The ring that was either being put up or was already up and guys were working in for the whole day. So they always knew where to find me. They didn't necessarily know where to find the producers sometimes. They didn't necessarily know where to find the director. They didn't want to go near Vince. They didn't want to go near Kevin Dunn. They also probably had instructions not to go near Vince and Kevin Dunn, probably by me. Because of that, because the building people, because there's always issues in the building. There's issues in the building all day. You know, I got to the building at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so Monday Night Raw starts at what? 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock? I don't know. On the East Coast? I don't even know anymore. What time does it
something
start?
like that. It's like 3 hours now, so the time is like even longer than
All
what
right,
it
so
was.
let's say it starts at 8 o'clock. We get to the building. I'm the first guy at the building. Well, the guys who are building the stages have been in the building since the night before. But I'm the first guy as part of the wrestling side, the show side, to get there. And I kind of take a quick look around, and I introduce myself to everybody, or I reintroduce myself to old friends, you know, because we did Oklahoma City 12, 15 times. We did St. Louis 15 times. We did Seattle 15 times. We did the Garden 20 times. Izod, you know, the Dunkin' Donuts in Providence. We did all those places. So most of the time it was just, hey, is George here? Hey, George, how are you? Remember me? Good to see you. Hey, so are we set on this? We set on this? We set on this? Then I'd wait for the limo to show up with the creative team. Then Steph to greet them and get them into their offices. And then the day would start, you know? And then I would have meetings every hour or two. The more security people came in, the more we needed, the more there were fans around, the more there were people cleaning inside, getting ready for the show. We didn't want them taking pictures of the wrestlers. You know, we didn't want people taking pictures of The Rock and Stone Cold talking when Rock and Stone Cold were mortal enemies. You know, some guy who comes in to clean seats before the show takes one picture, it goes out on the internet, and all of a sudden people are talking about, oh, I thought Rock and Steve had heat with each other. Look at them, they're having coffee together. You know what I mean? So then we got to make sure that the production truck is secure. We got to make sure all the doors around the place are secure. And then we have to have more meetings. And then we have to have, you know, I mean, it's constantly meetings and talking and making sure guys in the building who are now working for WWE, even though they work for the Dunkin' Donuts arena, you know, they're working for me that day. By the way, you know, make no mistake, this is going to sound a little egotistical, but it's the truth. Whether it was me or Jimmy Tillis, when we went into the building that day, in terms of risk assessment, threat assessment, and any type of logistics, me and Jimmy Tillis were the number one guys in the building for that day. Okay? Along with the guy who ran the building, we ran stuff all day long. Everything went partially through us. And then the show producer, whether it was Mark Yaton or John D'Amico or any of those guys, but we were the guys who handled the heavy lifting most of the day. And then we would do the show. Then after all that, all day, then we'd go out and do the 3-hour show and make sure there wasn't a jumper, and make sure if somebody got hurt that they had somebody by them or felt supported, or if somebody's mic went off, or if somebody's IFD went off and they looked at security, or Vince wanted to talk to somebody, you know, or Kevin Dunn in the production truck wanted to talk to me, you know, they'd scream in my ear and I'd look up at the hard camera. We'd be able to convey a message to somebody that way.
Now, what was it like working for Vince McMahon?
Vince, you know, it's hard not to like Vince. You know, it's hard not to like him. It's also hard to like him sometimes because he's Vince. He's, you know, kind of a cold guy. I'm going to give you my standard answer, which is I saw the world on Vince McMahon's dime, and I did it in first class. So guess what? You ain't ever going to hear a bad word about Vince McMahon from Jimmy Noonan. That is for sure. That you can bet on, because I slept in a lot of comfortable beds. I slept in a lot of first class. I sat in a lot of first class seats. Don't get me wrong. I had seen a lot of the world already, and since I've seen everywhere else. You know, I mean, my client right now, you know, travels all the time. So what was he like? He was a good guy. You know, he liked a rib, and if he was in a good mood, he'd say hello. And if he was in a bad mood, he wouldn't say hello. And sometimes you think, you know, wow, what's he in such a bad mood about? He wasn't in a bad mood. He was just being Vince. Vince was Vince. He's a complicated guy. It's a complicated family. It's a complicated business.
Now, since you were working security for WWE for all those years, could you tell our listeners some of your crazier experiences working there?
Oh God. These stories have been told so many times. They around the time in the middle 2000s, they started breaking kayfabe, and kayfabe was it in the business. Everything was a secret. Everything was kayfabe. I remember one night we were in Milwaukee at the where Bradley plays basketball, Bradley University, and it's that arena in Milwaukee downtown. And I remember one of the guys from La Resistance, the tag team, was talking and laughing with a guy he was just in a tag with. I can't remember who. It might have been Carlito or something like that. And Johnny Laurinaitis saw that. Johnny came out and cut a promo on him in front of all the fans on the other side of the gate. Do you know how much money we put into building these rivalries? Yeah. Why are you talking to him? You got no sense of the business. Get away from there. Get away from there. You guys crazy? And it was like they looked at me like, like what the hell was that about? But that's the way the business was. But around that time, they started, breaking kayfabe, and they did a story in WWF magazine called WWE Security's Greatest Hits. That's when we got to tell some of our more fun stories. There's the famous story that I actually wasn't a part of when the England, the last night of the England tour. I think it was a 2-week England tour. And I was on SmackDown, and we were already at the TV hotel, and Raw showed up, and all these MMA guys were there, like British MMA guys. And Jimmy Till says, "Hey, could you clear this area?" And the guy says, "No, we're here to see the wrestlers." He goes, "Well, you can't do that. You got to clear the area." And the guy said, "We're not clearing the area. We're here to see wrestlers." And one of the guys tried to get into it with Jimmy Tillis. And I'll tell you what, one thing about Jimmy Tillis can fight. Now, he didn't have a fight with this guy, but he let this guy know in certain terms that night. And he got his ass because there was a fight. One of the MMA guys, as all the Raw guys are getting off the bus, they started asking for autographs and pictures, and they were being really obnoxious because they were drunk MMA guys. And the WWE guys kicked their ass. Jericho, Big Vis, Jimmy Tillis, a bunch of guys. I think Fit Finlay. I mean, they just started knocking the shit out of these big tough MMA guys. So there's that night. There's the night the guy hit the ring during a commercial break in Detroit, and all hell broke loose. I think it was a SmackDown. And Triple H, for one night, got traded to SmackDown. And I believe Eddie was the champion. And it was Eddie and Triple H in the main event. Well, the main event's going on, and lo and behold, a commercial break comes up. But I don't know we're in commercial break. And a kid hits the ring. I mean, this kid is not a big kid. He was shorter than Eddie, and Eddie wasn't a big guy. Eddie was about 5'9". He was shorter than Eddie, but he actually jumped on the barrier right next to me, and he jumped from the barrier into the ring and landed on 2 feet in the ring. Triple H and Eddie see that, and they move towards the kid. The kid shits himself, and the kid jumps into my arm while I'm in midair, and I clobber this kid. Boom! His head goes down into the ground. And I don't know that nobody's telling me we're in a commercial break, and I don't want this kid to be seen. So I'm laying on top of this kid while he's squirming. I'm like holding his fingers, I'm holding his neck down. I'm trying to hurt him just so he'll stay down. And nobody's telling me we're in a commercial break anyway, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, a cop comes along and ties the kid up, and he got arrested that night. And then of course the fake Undertaker one night in Bangor, Maine. He was this tall, skinny kid, and he just walks into the ring one night, and we're all shocked. He's got a long black leather coat on, and he's got the Undertaker hat, and he's even holding an urn. And he he did it so slow that nobody even caught it. And he gets up on the ring apron. I run around the ring, and I take this kid midair, boom, outside the ring. I catch him, and I take him down to the floor. And the cops come, and they arrest the kid, and then they come to me, and they said, listen, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? You know, all protocol was, you know, properly attended to. What seems to be the problem? They said, well, he's got special needs. He's a special needs kid. And I felt terrible. We weren't going to press charges against the kid, but I mean, I just clobbered this kid. I clobbered the kid so good that Arn Anderson, he says, I will never have a fight with you. I saw you fly through the air and clobber that man. There was always stupid crap like that going on. There was always stuff. Mostly my stories are from Canada. You know, most of the good stuff happened in Canada. Lots and lots of fights and lots of situations. But we always got through it. I'll tell you what, when me and Tillis were there were a lot less problems than they've had since we were there. You know, we never had that many guys hit the ring that they do now. Wrestlers getting up close and personal with fans getting into the ring, fans hitting a wrestler. Like that kid in South Africa clobbered Randy in the nuts, gave him that nut shot when he was up on the thing, and then another guy walking down with Seth Rollins one night. We never had those problems at WWE. I'm pretty sure people were pretty much afraid of me until it.
You ran a tight ship while we were there. How many years did you work for WWE?
I think probably a total 7.5, 8 total.
How did your departure come about, or as Matt Coon would like to say, why it ended?
Listen, I had so much heat. I had so much heat. I had so much heat with this guy in the office. You know, he called me one day about a year before my last show, and he says, you know, you're not the most popular guy in the world. I said, with who? He said, with some of these arenas you go to. He says, there are people that even called you an asshole. I said, well, you know why they call me an asshole, right? He said, why? I said, 'cause I'm an asshole. I've got a tough job, bro. I'm traveling to a different city every day, different personalities. Some of these people don't like what I have to say to them sometimes. I walk into an arena and I hold a meeting for 100 guys who are going to work for me that day, and they disagree with about how I do things. There are going to be guys who are going to be unhappy with some outsider coming in and telling them to do things my way in their arena. But as I previously told you, when I went into the arena, I was the top guy in that arena in terms of security and risk assessment and threat assessment, because WWE said I was, because WWE rented that building that day. You get it? Right? So I have to consider all risks, all threats, all problems around intellectual property as it pertains to T-shirts and signs and people in the audience and things being said. I got to protect athletes. I got to protect backstages. I got to make sure people aren't sneaking pictures of my guys, not outside, but backstage and stuff. I got a tough job, and sometimes I got to open a can of whoop ass, as my friend Steve would say, okay? And people were really unhappy with me. But in most places, I didn't have any problems. I didn't have any problems in St. Louis. I didn't have any problems in Oklahoma City. I didn't have any problems at the IZOD Center in Jersey. I didn't have a lot of problems in a lot of places. I had problems in places like Steubenville, Ohio, the biggest shithole in the world, and Huntington, West Virginia, the second biggest crap hole in the world. These little places who didn't like the way I ran my show, you know. I'm sorry, but when I come in, if you don't get that day you're working for me, that's on you, bro. That's not on me. And I had a lot of people who were really unhappy with me, and enough of them complained that it started to become a problem. And I think between me being like 1,000% miserable, the travel, no time off, dealing with personalities, dealing with everything I had to deal with, and these people and me having heat. There was a saying at WWE: if you didn't have heat, you weren't doing your job. So I was like a typical guy. We all had heat, but I had heat with one particular guy in the office, and he didn't like the way I did things. So I got a letter in Kansas City, 3 months, 90 days before my contract was up. Thank you very much for your time, but we're pretty sure that we're not going to renew your contract. So that was a 90-day firing, right? 90 days. Is that the softest firing you ever heard, right? 90 days, okay? Now, at that point, Johnny Laurinaitis comes to me and says, what's this I hear about you leaving? I said, well, me and the guy in the office, we had a disagreement. He goes, I could make this all go away, right? And I said, Johnny, if there's anybody here who doesn't want me here, I don't want to be here anymore. I just do not want to be here anymore. Thank you very much for your concern, but I'm done. And 90 days later, my last show was in San Jose, California, and I bid adieu. I said goodbye to WWE for good, and I've never been back since.
Now, working with all that talent for so many years, with such a crazy schedule and just having to endure the grind, did you make friends with any of the boys? Is there anybody you're particularly close with?
Very close. I was very close to Dave Bautista. I wouldn't say I'm very close to him now, and that's not a shot or anything. Dave's a busy guy. Dave's a world-class performer now. It's tough to retain a consistent friendship under those circumstances between his life and my life. But do I consider him a friend? Yeah. Was I at his wedding last year? Yeah. Kurt Angle, I still talk to every once in a while. I've made a friendship with Jeff Jarrett, who you saw recently, and when you mentioned my name, apparently he got a big smile on his face, which was sweet. That was really nice to hear. Eddie was one of my best friends. Me and Benoit weren't friends, but I spent a lot of time with Chris. We weren't not friends either. It's just that Chris is a very difficult guy. Chris was so serious. A couple of the divas I still talk to, and I still commiserate with via Facebook and Instagram. There are some people I hope I never see again in my life.
You didn't have a good relationship with Chyna. Was there anybody else that you didn't see eye to eye with, never had a good experience working for or protecting?
I had a good probably 4 or 5 years with Booker T, and then it went sour really fast. Booker T was not a fan of Jimmy Noonan's. Booker T would probably disagree with this statement, but I was Dave Bautista's guy, and he found fault in everything I did because of that. He might disagree, but I know the truth. Me and Booker, the last 2-3 years, never got along. Some guys felt the need to, because I wasn't one of the boys, they felt the need to treat me differently, treat me badly. For some reason, Teddy Long used to talk to me really, really bad. He used to, for a while there was, hey, Noonan, what's up, brother? And then then I'm an asshole and I'm a this, I'm a that. One of the Hebner brothers got a little creepy there for a while. I didn't really see eye to eye with Mr. Calloway towards the end of my time there. You had to kiss Undertaker's ass. Because I had heat with Booker, Booker would take it to him, and then I'd have to get a talking to from. I'm not saying Mark Calloway was a bad guy. Most of the time he was a good guy, but towards the end, I remember one day he said to me, he says, you got to do your job, man. I go, well, wait a second. I've been doing my job for 7 years. All of a sudden I'm not doing my job. Nothing's changed. But he had Booker in his ear telling him I wasn't doing this, I wasn't doing that, I was a bad guy. Yeah, most of them were pretty cool.
That's fair enough. What would you say was your overall experience working for the WWE? If you could, would you do it all over again?
Why did you ask me that, bro? That is so unfair. That is so patently unfair of you to ask that. And I think deep down you know why. And I'm going to tell everybody why, just in case you don't know and they don't know. In 1999, my sister Peggy and my Aunt Peggy, my mom's sister, who Peggy's named after, they both called me and said, come on, have dinner with me. and two different dinners. And they both said to me at the time, "What's this thing I hear about you going to work for wrestlers?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be, a top security guy for the biggest entertainment juggernaut on the planet, the biggest traveling show in the world, makes Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus look like a bunch of pikers. The biggest traveling show in the world, and I'm going to be one of the top dogs there, in terms of security." I saw my first month's travel schedule, and I was going to Japan. I'd never been to Japan. I was going to Alaska. I'd never been to Alaska. I was going to all these cool cities, most of which I'd been to, and both of them said to me the same thing. They basically said, "Jimmy, you've been waiting your whole life to experience what's happening right now. And what's happening right now? You're just coming off a Broadway show. You're just coming off 3 TV shows. You're coming off Super Troopers. You're coming off, you got all this good stuff going on. You're a working actor. Why would you give that up for a paycheck?" And I said, "Well, I get to travel, and they're, "No, don't do it, man. Don't do it. You're giving up your dream. Your dream is coming true. We're here to tell you. We're here to be the voice of reason that your dreams are coming true. TV, Broadway, movies. Come on, man." And I went the wrong way. I went out with WWE. So, would I do it all over again? In the past, I'd say I'd do it again in a minute. And then as time goes by and you get older and you get to look back at your life, you go, "Man, I think I made a mistake." Now, did I make a bunch of money? Yeah. Did I fly around the world in business class and first class? Yeah. Was I upgraded because of all my stature on the airlines 9.5 out of 10 times? Upgraded to first class? Yeah. Was it nice? Yeah. Did I get to see cool places? Yeah. Did I get to meet a lot of hot women? Yeah. Well, would I do it over again? I don't know, bro. I really don't know. As of this moment, I'd have to lean towards no, but I'd probably leave it up to a coin flip. And that's sad. That's sad to me.
Well, I really appreciate your honesty, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners feel the same way. As we go ahead and wrap up the show, for people who want to get in touch with you on social media, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, ask some questions, follow you?
Well, you'd probably know the answer as good as me. So I'm Jimmy Noonan everywhere. Like, I'm Jimmy Noonan on Instagram. I'm Jimmy Noonan on Facebook. I'm The Noonan on my website. thenoonan.com is my personal website. entertainmentsecurityworldwide.com is my security business. Noonan Speaks at Gmail. You can write me any queries that you have. But yeah, pretty much on all social media, I'm Jimmy Noonan. So that's kind of easy. We'll have a platform someday where you guys can write in or telephone or however we decide to do it. If we're to be honest about this, Larry and I just decided at the last minute to do this. We didn't plan to do this tonight. It's a Saturday night. Larry's in wherever he is in the Midwest or the West Coast, and we're on Skype together, and I'm in New York City, and we were just going to do a dry run in terms of the things you need to do, the webcam and the microphone and headphones and all this stuff. And at the last minute, Larry said, "Well, why don't we just do a show, do like an introductory show?" We just went with it, and we just have been improvising this whole time. There was no rhyme or rhythm or set way to plan this tonight. And, I want to thank you for that, Larry. I think you did a nice job, and I think it's been fun. So moving forward, Larry is my producer. And Larry, what's your Instagram gimmick again?
Well, part of the reason for me to bring back the show with you is to get that experience you've had with these guys. You know, I like to focus on the history of professional wrestling. I've always been like a history buff, just growing up, and Hulk Hogan's what got me to be a fan. I'm just doing my thing, attending shows and stuff. When I hear a little kid ask his dad, who's Hulk Hogan, that's when I freaked out. I'm like, okay, well, I need to start a historical account on social media to teach these young kids, these millennials, these Generation Zs about the legends and stuff like that. So on social media, on my Instagram account, I'm WWE historian. And just for the record, I don't work for the WWE. I just thought, hey, I'll see if this name is available, and it was, to my surprise. So I just went ahead and took it.
So I have my perspective. Larry has his fan slash producer slash historian perspective. And I think together we can do some good things. And we are going to do a guest format. I don't think it would be appropriate right now, Larry. I'm pretty sure you would agree to tell people who we have coming up and who our first or second or third guests are. But I will tell you that we will probably in the next week or so, we will probably have on Noonan Speaks a World Wrestling Entertainment Hall of Famer, probably as our first guest. And I would imagine after that, you know, we've talked to a few people and got a few people lined up. We will have more than one or two or three World Wrestling Entertainment, World Wrestling Federation Hall of Famers, WCW Hall of Famers, and anybody who can lend themselves to a good story and promote the business. I was never a mark. I was never really a fan. If anything, in the Attitude Days, I watched a little WCW on Monday nights, and I don't think I ever told too many people that. And before that, in the early 1980s, 82, 83, 84, I used to open a bar on Saturday mornings, and I had to get in there at 10 o'clock in the morning to clean the place up from the night before and get my bar ready for the day. And I'd turn on the TV, and there'd be these Saturday morning wrestling shows, and I'd watch Don Morocco, and I would watch Jumpin' Jim Brunzell and B. Brian Blair, the Killer Bees. And I'd watch this young guy who wore this thing around his hair, and he had this long, crazy hair, and he had this deep voice, and his name was Randy Savage, the Macho Man. And this guy who walked around with a scholastic hat on his head named Lanny Poffo. And I was like, what the hell is this? And once in a while I would see, you know, Andre the Giant, and I became sort of a fan. I thought it was really interesting. So one could argue that I have a wrestling background. You know, I was really interested in those days. And then, of course, I became, you know, the guy I became at WWE. So between me and, you know, Larry here, WWE historian, we're not here to bury anybody in business. We're not going to go into business for ourselves. If anything, we're probably going to put the business over, you know, because why not? It's probably the right thing to do. And at the end of the day, you know, I guess maybe I'm still a fan, and maybe I just always want good things. I just, you know, I'm not mad at the business. I made the choice, and that's not what this is about. I just, you know, I have an interesting perspective, and I think I'm gonna just be I'm gonna lend a voice to the business, and it's gonna be my voice, and we're gonna have some fun. But between me and Larry, we're not out to hurt anybody. We come in peace.
Absolutely. And for anybody interested in following the show on social media, you can reach us on Facebook. Just type in Noonan Speaks. It'll be like the first thing that pops up. And on Twitter, we have an account for the show at Noonan Speaks. Any parting words, Jimmy?
Nothing except, listen, you know, you got your choices, folks. You got I Am Rappaport, and you got Stone Cold, and you got these indie wrestlers, and you got all these all these podcasts to listen to, and you're listening to me. I hope we do right by you, and I'm really looking forward to a long journey, and God bless you all. And as my friend RVD would say, peace.